all of our content's being consumed by AI, right? And therefore, at some point, there's probably one vector out there that has crossed into that book because he probably wrote it using AI, which is probably a vector that was in one of our episodes. So in theory, I'm a very small but very important contributor.
Welcome to the show, where air takes the floor. Lee and Rich on the mic.
Welcome to the AI Guys podcast, where we make artificial intelligence easy to understand for everyone. I'm your host, Lee Dixon, and as always, I'm joined by our in-house AI clairvoyant, Rich Swire.
Is a clairvoyant a person that can like move things in a room?
No, the clairvoyant is someone who can see the future.
I can move things in a room, but I can't see the future.
I
don't know what that's called.
I think it's telekinetic.
Is that what it is? Telekinetic?
Telekinesis? Yeah, you can move things. Merlin and our producer in the chat said that it's telekinetic, and that's how I know he and I are both big nerds.
There you go. So, yeah. Maybe someday I can be a future teller, but right now it's just moving heavy objects with my mind.
Yeah, well, I'm going to need you to move a heavy object like a magic ball right in front of you, and I want you to look into there. We're going to talk a little bit about the future. When this episode comes out in a few weeks, ChatGPT 5 will be out. We're talking about some things with Grok Heavy 4 and all of that. So I want to dive right into it. Every time we kind of get into these cycles, and we've done this a few times on the podcast over the last year or so, when new models come out, everything gets hyped up. I feel like this time around, there's maybe a little less hype, especially because businesses are really starting to get into their own lane of understanding what a model needs to do for them to actually be able to do it. So I thought today's topics could be maybe geared towards that, as far as maybe the hype piece being more for the consumer, but businesses needing that clarity. And then maybe talking about some of these models and where they're promising certain things, just to see if it's even going to be business applicable.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's layers of excitement depending on what perspective you have, right? If you're like a techno nerd, who's really into...
Sorry, Rich, that's telekinetic.
Telekinetic nerd. Telekinetic nerd, that you're really into the bits and bytes of this stuff, then, the recent release of Grok 4 was a pretty big and significant milestone, because I don't know if you recall, but when they were building out his the super center or whatever, the biggest AI supercomputer, Colossus, I think they called it, probably 9 months ago or even almost a year ago. Obviously, it's been training pretty consistently off of those GPUs, and then now you have Grok 4, which is kind of the first, I think, run or developed model off that Colossus supercomputer. So, and it's certainly showing a pretty significant increase in efficacy and capabilities beyond the current model. So it definitely leapfrogged all the main models, which is not uncommon, because what happens is that everybody's on a different cycle. So
someone sets a new plateau, everyone gets that, or someone jumps above
they're all
them.
kind of training as we speak. So GPT-5, when that comes out in August, has been training for 6 months or whatever it might be. Yeah. And that's expected to obviously leapfrog, or at least compare to a Grok 4. I think there's three ways you can look at it, right? You can look at it as there's a continuation and a very large investment being had both at the training side of things, but now also in the inference side of things, which is making these models better, not only from a consumption of documentation or data and making it smarter, but as you are talking to it inference-wise, it's able to get a much more broader and calculate a better answer. And so you're starting to see this with the new generation of chips. And I think that's one element that's different than the past, where like GPT 1, 2, 3, 4, there wasn't that much investment and intention inside of the inference side of the world. That was relatively unique and new, and yet to be kind of pushed forward. And I think that's what we're starting to see, is this inference side is being pushed forward, which is really where you're going to get I think a step function increase in capabilities. The second big thing that people, I think, are keeping their eye on is the influx of Blackwell and the new generation of NVIDIA chips, which are were released earlier this year. But just because they were released and shown on a trade room floor doesn't mean that they're actually installed, working, and training models. Right. So you still got a lot of older chips that have created these massive supercomputers like Colossus that are still running the show. But so Blackwell, and I'm not 100% sure on this, but I'd have to check my facts, but I'm pretty sure that maybe GPT-5 might be one of the first models that is either using a small cluster of these Blackwell computer chips or maybe entirely, but maybe GPT-5 might be the first model that starts to see what kind of impact those things might have on the ability for the models to be bigger, better, faster. It might just be that they can train faster. It might not even be a factor of it being smarter at the end of the day, but training faster will mean more iteration and more versions quicker.
And then
and
these versions, I think, are, for the most part, these are pretty big steps up from 4 to 5. I know, the context windows are getting bigger. I mean, Super Grok Heavy, I think, has one of 256,000, and GPT-5 is, from a turbo perspective, I think is 128. But again, facts there might be a little bit off. But at some point, do you feel like those pieces of the hype are even needed for, I guess, I don't want to say the average user, because I think every business is a little bit different, but it seems to me that we're getting bigger and broader and stronger with a lot of these things, but a lot of people's main use cases for these models is something that probably for the foreseeable future will still run on the 4 models. Would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have I think you have two kinds of users right now in AI. The people who are actually in the business, living and breathing it, and usually it's very deep in the stack too, right? These are people that are actually, like the NVIDIA is actually using and eating its own dog food, or the Googles of the world, Facebooks of the world. I think they're using AI to the maximum capacity, right? They're maxing out those context windows. Nobody in the business world right now is maxing out 256K of a context window with a prompt. It just does not.
No, and they shouldn't.
They're not processing at that heavy, that amount of data in an average prompt for whatever they're doing. That being said, there might be a subset of businesses that are maybe a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more innovative and pumping a ton of documents in there and stuff like that. And of course, that's where you get to limitations. But there's a very small percentage, I think, of businesses that are naturally building out and pushing AI to its limit. That being said, I do think that you're right. When the dust settles, you have this dichotomy of innovation curve, especially in the early stages, is going so fast, and there's so much new features that are coming out that it's very hard for a business to scope out a use case, blueprint it, put a team, allocate time, test, train, go live, get it to the users, have the users give feedback, iterate, and actually implement a solution. The average business might take months, if not years, to do that, just because of the inertia of how humans operate. Mm-hmm. But when you have a new model and a new feature and a new capability coming out every 3 months, you can't just stop mid-project and say, okay, guys, I know we trained this and I know we tested this on GPT-4o, but we're going to replace it now with O3. And then the next thing you know, nothing works the same way, right? Because these models are, certainly they behave differently. Or worse would be oh, hey, we were on GPT-4o because it was the best model in September last year. But man, Grok just came out, so we're just going to switch everything. And it just that's also not reasonable to do. So I think there's these delays in how it impacts and how it ultimately ends up in the hands of businesses doing solutions. In fact, I would argue that probably most of the out of the box AI solutions that are out there that you're buying, whether it be from a SaaS company or what other company, they're probably still on the 3 models, because it's that the upgrade path to change that out. It could be a cost issue, it could be a prompting issue, it could be a performance issue. As we've known, we've launched many agents and many AI projects where if you just switch the model because you think you're upgrading, now it behaves differently, and now it's not as good as the old model because you had trained the old model to operate. You would give them instructions, and you had human feedback and all those other elements as part of it. So upgrading models isn't like upgrading software. And we talked about this in past episodes. It really is a change in thinking. And ever since the reasoning model started to come out to fruition, that has also had a huge impact on how businesses think about implementing AI, because there is a very clear distinction between using a either a smaller large language model or a model that is very kind of prompt and response oriented versus a reasoning model, where you could almost say that that's the beginnings of like an agentic model, where you're giving it a task or a complex query and it's going out and doing it. And it might take 4 or 5 minutes to come back. And that's not a chat.
Yeah.
That's and we realize everybody's coming in from a chat experience, right? They're coming in going, asking a question and then waiting a few seconds and getting a response. And that's kind of the user behavior.
Yeah.
Shifting to a reasoning model is more like, hey, go do research on this company and give me all this information and compare it with the top 10 companies in that same space and and enter. And then the reasoning model is not just going to come back with an answer. It's going to go off and do all that. And it might take minutes or hours. And so that's another interesting dynamic where that behavior is also very, very new. It's very exciting. But that behavior is what's driving the next layer of innovation with LLMs. So now everybody is making bigger and bigger and bigger models to support that user behavior. And I think we maxed out, I guess, quote unquote, what I would call the single prompt user behavior. And now we have chain of thought and more reasoning models, and maybe even a chained model approach where you might be using multiple models from different providers to enhance that. That also throws in a little bit of a wrench when it comes to adoption. So I do agree that I think all adoption of basic software integration with models has taken has halted at the reasoning model level, because that's not a very simple way of maneuvering up, right? If you're doing a chat with an AI or a customer live chat that's on your support site for your customers, you're not going to implement a reasoning model haphazardly, because now you've broke the number one rule, which is it takes 5 minutes to get back to this customer with an over verbose, probably over engineered answer where they could have just hit the vector store for a very simple answer in the knowledge base. So it's all about use cases, but I do think it's exciting for the general to see the step function improvement of where we are headed. And Grok 4 has kind of put the stake in the ground, obviously, recently for doing that.
Yeah. Well, we talk about workflow reliability a little bit, where, whatever the use cases that you're currently deploying an agent for, like, really be mindful. Does a new version bring enough value to you to then maybe have to go back and do the spot checks and make sure that whatever you're making the adjustment? I think outside of the tech space, something you kind of alluded to in your talk just then is the fact that a lot of companies are still very early in like the adoption phase, meaning that people inside are still kind of getting used to it. They might really like AI, but you swap over to a new model and then literally all of the hard work that's been done to kind of like fine tune it and make it kind of dial it in the way you want possibly shifts slightly, or now it's just not operating the same way it was before. And now you bring back in the FUD that had at that point almost been completely snuffed out. And people go like, oh God, is this going to happen every 6 months? That, so every time there's a flashy new toy, like we go down for 2 weeks as far as like just not feeling like it's the values there anymore.
There's it's really interesting when you're dealing with clients who, most people have experienced ChatGPT and that experience is kind of the standard of how people measure. But even within that, it's gotten to the point where people are, extraordinarily critical of when an AI does something slightly wrong or doesn't do it exactly how they expect it.
Yeah.
And they hold AI at a much higher standard than they would a colleague or a coworker or any other, person, as far as, if I came to you and I asked you a question, I wouldn't expect the answer to be exactly what I was hoping to gather from it, especially if my question was like, hey, what's going on with this? And you might just say, oh, it's going great. And that's it. And like, well, that's not what I asked. I want more detail. So conversations for us humans is typically like fluid and it's a series of repeatable questions that ultimately end up being the prompt. And then you get what you want.
Qualitative and quantitative.
But they don't, because we're so used to the one and done Google search or one and done even ChatGPT experience where you just put a prompt and get a response. This idea of talking to the AI or having a conversation, or at least at a minimum, giving it a large enough prompt or more specific enough prompt to get the response that you want. We're still very early in just how humans interact with AI. So one of the other, kind of as I mentioned earlier, there's two kind of really users. There's the super user, which are the people who are just like absolutely maxing out every capability of AI and shoving as much information into that prompt and getting a tremendous amount of value out of it because they're doing the hard work, versus what I would call the casual user, which is 99.9% of the rest of us. And the casual user is kind of lazy about it because it's a new user behavior. They're not putting in sophisticated prompts. They're not maxing out the context window. They're not giving, they're not dragging and dropping 4 documents in there and as part of their prompt to really make the AI think. So to some degree, the innovation of these reasoning models and these new models are never going to really be the culture lag. The casual user has to catch up to that, right?
Yeah.
We're still, we're still, I think, coming off this social media hangover, which if it's never been more clear, in how this user behavior shift is happening, because for 20 years we've been basically programmed to be tweeting. Right? Like tweeting our philosophical and religious beliefs in 140 characters or less. Sure. And we've been able, and videos have gone from 2-hour movies down to 3-minute YouTubes, down to 30-second,
Shorts.
TikToks, and down to 2-second Instagram reels. And so as the world and our brains have been programmed to shrink, now when we're faced with having super intelligence, or at least at a minimum, our general intelligence at our fingertips, with a blinking prompt, it's almost like we're monkeys. We don't know we don't even know how to prompt this thing. And we've forgot how to actually invoke and create conversational intelligence. And so there's this like jarring effect you can see in people when they're just not, this is a tool. It's literally probably the most powerful tool that humans have ever had access to, but we just do not know how to use it. And there's no real, like, other than using it and other than kind of investigating it and experimenting with it, there's nothing pushing us forward to do so rapidly. And I think that's where the inertia comes in, especially with businesses, because you could say to all your employees, all right, I'm going to give you access to AI, and we're going to start building AI, and it's going to automate all these tasks you hate, and do this, and do that, and get an ROI. It's going to make everybody happier and us more profitable, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't mean that they're going to adopt it, use it the right way, or even get the ROI out of it, because they might not even know how to use it. And then the minute that they ask it something and it gives kind of either a half response, or maybe even slightly wrong response,
you
or
can
whatever.
say half-ass on this podcast. We've said worse.
All right. I'll next time I will. Bleep me out, Merlin. But as the minute you start to have this high expectation because you've given all this power to your employee, or and think that immediately it's going to pay back because these people are going to know how to use it, is a wrong approach too. So you have these massive gaps in adoption, in understanding how to use the tool, and then the tool is just continuously getting better exponentially. So I think there's going to be
a lot of moving parts to like keep your eye on.
I mean, I'm sure the guys, there's this race happening toward AGI and then toward super intelligence. And, there's 4 or 5 horses in that race. And it's very important to get there. And they're all going to get there probably at the same time, quite honestly. And that's good for humanity and good for everybody. But then they're going to have to figure out how to drag us along. They're going to figure out, they're going to have to come back and get these, 6 billion people. And they're going to they have to pull them toward that. And I think
it's like the caveman who created the wheel and fire and like tried to show everybody, everyone's just like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Right. Exactly right. And it's, and then you have to really see the circumstances and the that occur either negatively if you don't use it, which is going to naturally happen, because this is a classic technology curve, is that the pain is, the pain to learn something new and to change becomes less than the pain that it's actually causing you for other people doing it, adopting it quicker, right? Like, we've seen industries disappear overnight with technology advances. So yeah, I mean, I think, ultimately when you kind of go back to your original point on this show, is that these models, although they are iterative and all they do open up and break new boundaries or pass new kind of tests or whatever, these artificial tests they come up with, like, oh, it solved all the math problems, it did this really well. The reality is that the use that's happening at the consumer level is very immature and very limited, right?
Yeah.
They're still treating it like a better Google. They haven't advanced into thinking about it as a person or as a very
entity.
I've got Aristotle in my living room. Let me have a chat with Aristotle. What ends up happening is you ask Aristotle how to make a better pecan pie recipe. That's what. So it's just like an advanced Google, right?
Which was good.
Yeah. So. And Aristotle, hey, we all know Aristotle could bake a pie, but he could also, he also understands other things like ethics and the universe. But hell if he can't bake a damn pecan pie.
No, exactly. But one thing you touched on there outside of the pie that really caught my attention. I mean, we've touched on this a couple times as far as maybe the detriment that social media was to society, as far as how it took us away from being creators and took us just to strictly consuming. And then over time, that consumption became more and more compressed, and we don't have the time, right, to like think about, oh, let's go make a 2-hour movie. It's like, no, I just want like 30 seconds of like my hot take and then walk away, and just leave it there existing. So like having people understand that AI, one, is not something that just is instant gratification, but two, it has the power to do so much more the more time that you're giving to actually understand its capability, is something that I think will take the general populace much more time to really, truly like open the door and adopt than forward-thinking businesses, or just like the enterprise level of where all of this AGI stuff is taking place, where they're just looking at it as like, well, look, if you're not going to jump on the rocket ship, like we're going to get there without you. So like, we're just going to keep trudging, like pushing along, and then you can figure out how to get here when you see that it's real.
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting, I mean, if you kind of look at it from like a psychology, sociology perspective, it's really interesting that, the social media, phase of the internet, and the AI phase of the internet kind of spawned from the same desire, just the wrong execution. One was, I want to compress time, like you said. Yeah. So I don't want to watch this 2-hour movie. I'll just watch this 3-hour clip or 3-minute clip. Therefore, I save X number of minutes, or I can condense this into a very small, digestible tweet, and I don't have to read the whole news article. Yeah. And so. But that's a very empty calorie way of doing it, because you don't understand the context of that beyond that, right? You're just compressing time.
You just consumed.
You're consuming a summarized and a very lightweight version of something that might actually, affect how you believe or what you ultimately develop as a person. And then AI is compressing time, I think, in the right way, which is it's saying, okay, no, you should be reading that long form book by, I keep pumping Aristotle, but like, or you should spend time and have a conversation about whatever with AI to learn about X, Y, and Z. And I'm going to allow you to do that because I'm going to automate these other things that were eating up your time before. And so it's a reallocation of your time versus just like a waste of time.
Sure.
So that's the, social media is like when, my wife doesn't do this, but it's it's probably more of a Merlin joke. But like, when women come home and say, oh, I just went, or a man, I guess it could be a man too. I don't want to be sexist, but like,
Rich,
when you come home and you say, hey, I just went, I saw a sale at the mall, and guess what? I bought these new shoes, and I saved us $100. And the mentality of that is that, okay, but you still spent money on the shoes. Like, you didn't have to buy the shoes at all, and you would have, but the whole idea of saving, and that's, I think social media has that same issue, which is like, it's really truly a complete waste of time, but you're consuming your time thinking it's actually being used or entertaining yourself, or maybe you do think it's somewhat educational. And in some cases it might be, but the reality is because you're reprogramming your brain, it doesn't consume it. And AI is there to do that for you, which is the irony, is now AI can go out there, consume everything, all living things that are accessible illegally or legally by Sam over there at OpenAI, and then bring it to you in any form and function that you want to in a very short period of time. Like, for example, right now, before I got on this pod, I was complaining to Merlin about like I'm writing all the support this new training program, right, that we're launching. Yeah. It's a pretty heavy amount of training going into this, all this text and all this other stuff. But if I had to do this 5 years ago, I would actually be sitting there writing it. But now I'm just taking my seed of information of what I want to say and the key points and how to go about it, and then using AI to help fill in the blanks and help expand on it. And I'm just doing it through chatting with the AI to continue to build it. Now it takes me
with the guidance.
Takes me way less time. And so although I'm the originator of the ideas, AI is smart enough because it has consumed, not all ideas are original, that it's doing all this. And I think as these models get better and better and better, and as they become more and more, I think, powerful is probably the right word, in the sense of how they can intuit and how they can be more nuanced and how they can be more personalized to the user. That's probably going to have to happen before consumers start running toward AI like they ran toward Instagram. Because the AI people, the one thing that they're missing today, and ChatGPT has kind of touched on it a little bit, but still is a little bit off mark, is they have to make it where people feel this tremendous amount of intimacy to the point of addiction on using this tool instead of logging onto some other app, right? And so if they can I think they've single-handedly beat out the Google search experience for most part. I think people are now defaulting toward using AI to at least search more complicated ideas, maybe not searching for a pizza place, but certainly what I would call knowledge search is shifting rapidly to the models, and like Grok and these others. But what they need to capture next is get people off the Gram and off the TikTok, or at least a little bit off those apps, and using this for fulfillment. And I think that's when the models, and maybe GPT-5, maybe these, Grok to some degree seems to have that. It has a little bit more swag than other models. So I think I think that's the barometer that people need to kind of measure against, not necessarily all the barometers that the older models were measured against. Does this feel like it can be a friend, a personal experience? It can be funny. It makes me laugh. It makes me entertain. It makes me want to share the result. When you start seeing people create memes inside of these AI models and share it with their friends, that's the behavior that is a signal, is the canary in the coal mine of like that. This is social behavior. That's what social media kind of ruined, but it captured that opportunity. And if it shifts to AI, then I think we're,
might come back a little more holistically.
And it's most likely going to merge because, Facebook is an AI and they own an Instagram. So, but my point being, it will be a better experience, I think, long run.
Yeah. No, that's great. And for everyone listening, thanks again for joining us on this episode. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to stay in touch. Also, check out our Substack for more content, which will be linked to this episode to continue this discussion. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
Takes the flow, Leah Rich on the mic, ready to explode.